Part 1.
Exam practice. Listening. You'll hear a woman calling Laverton Arts Centre for some information. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Laverton Arts Centre. How can I help you?
Hello. I've been to the Arts Centre a few times recently, and I understand you have this scheme for regular visitors.
The Friends of Laverton Arts Centre. Yes, that's right.
I wonder if you could tell me a little about it. I mean, how much it costs and what benefits it offers, things like that.
Certainly. Well, first of all, the good news is that we've recently changed the scheme. It used to cost £15 a year, but now it's free. All you have to do is fill in an application form. You can either come to the Arts Centre and do that here, or you can go to our website and apply online.
And so what are the benefits of joining?
There are actually quite a few. As a friend of Laverton Arts Centre, you'll receive a newsletter every 3 months with information on all the forthcoming events.
That sounds useful.
You also get priority booking for shows and concerts in the main theatre.
Can you explain how that works exactly?
Yes. What that means is that when tickets go on sale, for the first 2 days they're only available to friends of the Arts Centre. So as long as you book early, you can make sure you get seats.
Great! Do you ever offer discounts to friends of the centre?
Under the old system, when you had to pay to be a member, we did. Under the new system, there won't be any discounts for shows in the main theatre or films at the Arts Cinema. Having said that, we will be offering some discounts to members for performances in the small theatre. There'll be information about this in each issue of the newsletter.
I suppose I can find that information online as well, can I?
Absolutely. Actually, we're redoing our website at the moment. Right now, there actually isn't a special section for Friends of the Arts Centre on the website. Once the site's been redesigned, there will be. You'll be able to put in your username and password and enter a special section just for you.
It sounds excellent. Are there any requirements, though? I mean, as a member, do I have to do anything?
Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that. There are no formal requirements at all, though obviously we have this scheme to encourage people to attend events here regularly. So we ask that you attend at least 4 events a year, whatever they are, if you possibly can. Nobody's going to count, though, and it's totally up to you.
That sounds fair enough. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
While you're here, we're actually conducting a short survey of people who phone up the Arts Centre. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions? It'll only take a couple of minutes.
Sure, no problem.
Thanks a lot. So, how many times have you visited Laverton Arts Centre in the last 6 months?
Well, I've only lived in the area for the last 4 months, so not that many times. 3, I suppose. Yes, that's right.
Fine. And how did you first find out about the Arts Centre?
Let me think. Oh, yes, a friend invited me to a concert and I came with her.
Have you ever seen a film at the Arts Cinema here?
No, I haven't, to be honest. In fact, until you mentioned it earlier, I didn't realise you even had a cinema.
One more question. If we offered a free tour of the Arts Centre, including things such as going backstage to look at the dressing rooms, would you be interested in going on it?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think a tour like that would be very interesting. I'd even pay for it.
That's great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You are going to listen to a conversation between two students about preparing a questionnaire as part of an essay assignment.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
I've never written an essay of more than 1,500 words before, Anne.
Me neither, Mark, and it scares me.
I wouldn't worry. We'll just have to pretend it's 4 essays of 1,500 words and join them together.
It says here in the assignment notes Dr. Brightwell gave us that we're to write between 5,000 and 6,000 words on some aspect of students' attitudes, backed up by our own research, which we present in the form of tables, graphs, charts or whatever, and supported by reference to the list of books she gave us. Oh, I didn't realise there had been so many social science books written about students.
Oh, yeah. There are a lot. And the questionnaire?
Yes. We have to prepare a questionnaire to gather our own data for the graphs, etc., and hand it in to Dr. Brightwell in draft form in 2 weeks' time.
2 weeks?
That's what she said, and what it says here. She says that it's better to have it checked before we go on to collect the information and start the writing.
Suppose she's right. We'd better get started then. But she didn't say how we were going to put the questionnaire together. Does it say anything in the notes?
Nope. It only says that we are limited to 4 sides of A4 and no more than 50 questions.
If that's the case, it's not that bad.
Before you hear the rest of the programme, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
So, how are we going to do it?
Well, first we need to know who we're aiming it at. Then decide how many questions we're going to ask. I think we could have about 40 questions maximum. I don't think there's any real need to go up to the 50 limit. And I think we should keep the questions themselves very simple.
Don't worry. In my case, they will be.
We could have a mixture of question types like multiple choice questions. Yes, no, and agree, disagree, with boxes for people to tick. If people are asked to write down anything, it's unlikely they will fill it in.
So, are we going to give this questionnaire out to people to hand in, or are we going to just stop and ask them around the campus or on the street?
I don't really know. Did she say anything about this? No, she didn't. And there is nothing in these notes she gave us either.
I think we ought to give them out.
OK.
Anyway, it won't affect the way we design the questionnaire.
We're both doing it on different subjects, but there's nothing wrong with pooling our ideas about the mechanism of the questionnaire.
No, none. What are you doing your project on?
I've been thinking about doing something around the subject of how aware students are of world affairs. People think that we're all up to date, but I very much doubt it. It would also be interesting to compare students in different years. And you?
I'm doing something on health and sport, and whether students are more or less active since they came to university.
Oh, sounds interesting. As the questionnaires can be anonymous, I'll fill in your first questionnaire for you. But I'm sure you won't be surprised by my answers.
Somehow, I don't think so.
I suggest we put together about 20 or 25 questions each and then meet tomorrow or the day after and compare them.
Are you going to type yours up?
Yeah, then I can come round to your place and we can work on them. You've got a laptop, haven't you?
Yes, and I've got some new design software so we can play around with the layout.
Brilliant. Are you any good at doing charts and things?
I know how to do simple things on the computer, but we'll sort something out.
OK.
I feel much better about all this now. It doesn't seem quite as bad as I first thought.
No, don't worry, we'll get it done.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
Richard Murray, a zoologist and popular TV personality, has been giving a talk on endangered species of wildlife to members of the Young Conservationists Association in a small town in the south of England. Listen to the extract from the discussion he had with 2 of the young people after his talk.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
What would you say, Mr. Murray, are the main reasons that so much of our wildlife will have died out by the end of the next few decades?
Well, Tony, we can't, of course, rule out the effect of urbanisation due to the spread of population. But apart from that, I believe there are 2 reasons which, in a way, are like the opposite ends of a piece of string. If you tie a knot in that piece of string, you end up with a circle, and whichever way you go round, it's going to turn out to be the same.
I don't think I quite get that, Mr. Murray.
Well, let's put it another way. It's rather like a film. You've got the good guys and the bad guys. They're pulling in opposite directions, but when it comes to the final showdown, it's hard to make out which is which.
What are your 2 reasons, Mr. Murray?
I call them greed and caring.
Greed and caring?
Yes, I know they don't seem to have much to do with one another, but think about it. The motive of greed is pretty obvious. In the course of the next few months, thousands of baby seals will be bludgeoned to death before they're even weaned from their mothers. What for? For the sale of their skins at inflated prices to please the vanity of a few and line the pockets of the killers. Crocodiles will be slaughtered to provide shoes and handbags for the rich. Gorillas, tigers, leopards and rhinos will be hunted for senseless sport or poached in defiance of regulations. Their skins, their horns, and their magnificent heads will be used as trophies to decorate someone's living room floor or walls.
That's terrible.
Yes, but it's not all. The whale, probably the most impressive and certainly one of the most intelligent sea mammals in creation, will be cruelly hunted and harpooned to make more money for the profiteers. The dolphin, the sailor's friend, will be indiscriminately battered to death at so much a head on the grounds that it is taking away the livelihood of a few fishermen by consuming the fish in its natural habitat.
But surely, Mr. Murray, we do have to keep warm. We need whale oil and ambergris. Fishermen have to make a living.
Part of what you say is true, of course, Tony, but we shall have to enforce far stricter controls if future generations are not to find themselves in a world devoid of wildlife as we know it.
Well, I see what you mean about fur coats and crocodile handbags, Mr. Murray, but I don't understand what you mean by caring. That can't be bad, surely. I mean, I thought we were supposed to be living in a caring society.
Well, so we do, in a way. The trouble is, there are so many well-intentioned people who start out with the best possible motives of trying to protect or immunize us from this, that, or the other in the most effective way at the quickest possible rate. But in their enthusiasm, they lose sight of the long-term consequences. It's only very gradually that the danger to other forms of life, including humans, comes out. Not to say leaks out, and by that time it'll probably be too late to do much about it. Take insecticides, for instance.
But Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
But insecticides protect crops from pests. They destroy disease-carrying mites and creepy crawlies like cockroaches.
True, but nature has a way of developing her own immunity against insecticides and other pest controls, with the result that the biologists are driven to inventing stronger and stronger compounds, which, though they may annihilate the pest, nevertheless permeate the environment, are assimilated by plant and animal life, and become absorbed by the soil. Countless innocent creatures, the beaver or the mole, for example, are performing a useful task in the natural control. The alarming prospect is that as these poisons enter the foods we eat, and consequently our own systems, they'll find their way into the body of the pregnant mother and into her milk, offering incalculable risks to the unborn or newly born infant. In spite of all our technological expertise, our time is running out. We're virtually destroying ourselves.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a part of a lecture about interest rate. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Since the beginning of the global financial crisis more than 10 years ago, the developed world has remained in an ultra-low interest rate void. Economists are searching for a way out, but now there may not be one. The U.S. economy appeared to be on the path towards more normal interest rates and growth, even though they had become more cautious stepping into 2020. Japan and Europe did not look to be improving anytime soon, and even the incredible expansion that was being witnessed in the case of China was slowing under the pressure of a U.S. trade war. Then the world economy came to a complete halt with the COVID-19 virus shutdowns in a way which has never been witnessed. Production came to a halt, ports were closed, and stock markets plummeted. 10 years after the worst of the crisis appeared to pass in 2019, banks and policymakers were shocked that despite the great steps they had taken to kickstart their economies, normal growth settings would probably not be seen for many years to come. Central banks had tried to get things moving, but even before COVID-19, any time there was the hint of a slight tweak upwards in interest rates, the stock markets reacted negatively, forcing the banks to back off. If central banks try to normalize their monetary settings now, it could risk an even greater crisis. The big question is, will interest rates ever rise again? Are we to expect the current situation to continue as a type of new normal? From the beginning of the century, the very nature of world industries was reshaped by new technology. 30 years ago, the world's biggest companies were mainly fossil fuel energy and motor vehicle manufacturers. Now, the majority are tech companies and banks. The top tech companies, like Amazon, do not require huge capital investments and large workforces like the 20th century industries did. As a result, until very recently at least, savings rates in the developed world had increased, but the demand for capital investment and human resources decreased. In the wake of COVID-19, however, any expectation of unchanging interest rates and high levels of savings is no longer secure, and only time will tell what form the world economy will take in the coming years. Pre-COVID-19, it was believed that the demographic and technological shifts that had been occurring over the previous decade may have permanently set interest rates at levels never previously experienced. Of course, globalization and the lowered cost of imported manufactured products was also another factor when trying to figure out why the world economy seemed to be slowing down. Now, the very existence of globalization is under threat. There are some who believe that the developed world's economies would have slowed down anyway, regardless of whether the 2008 financial crisis had occurred. It seems we may be able to blame something else on the baby boomers apart from climate change. Baby boomers are the generation born between 1946 and 1964, and they have the largest savings, home ownership, and spending power of any of the generations. The oldest segment of baby boomers, those born in the first 10 years after the Second World War were just starting to enter retirement when the economic crisis occurred. The rest of them, and some older ones who remained in the workforce to recoup capital losses from the crash, will have retired by the end of the decade. This means that they have had to become even more diligent savers in order to finance the years they will not be working. They have been a particularly productive segment of society. Economically speaking, it was probably more down to luck than anything. They were just born at the right time. They grew up in the post-war period of high growth and economic stability. There were few problems to stop this prosperity for them as they moved into the workforce, except perhaps the fuel crisis in the 1970s. During the 1990s, they reached their peak earning period in a time of prosperity and were well positioned to stake their savings in the technological boom. Each month now, until 2031, more and more of them will be going into retirement. As baby boomers retire, we should expect wide-ranging effects. As retirees, not only will they no longer contribute taxes, but they will be spending less, which is not a good recipe for economic growth. Before the recession of 2008, a retiree could invest their savings in the money market and get a 3 to 4% annual return on their investment. Now they would be lucky to get 0.75%. This means that the wealth of the baby boomers is going to dwindle during their retirement. Add to that a growing life expectancy, meaning they will need to support themselves for a longer period, and the amount of these savings that will have disappeared during the COVID-19 crisis, the outlook is not looking so good. Many baby boomers may end up living in poverty at the end of their lives. There are so many unknowns ahead of us economically in light of the current crisis. It is no longer easy to speculate.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.